The Buddhist views, gates and thresholds. No single gate, the wheel turns. Where the Vedic scene makes the earth, Agni and Yama, the household's first pass at passage. The classical Hindu map turns the domestic accountancy into a cosmic bookkeeping of karma and lokas. Buddhism relocates the whole problem. The gate is not a door, but a death moment, and the karmic condition that rippens the next life. The wheel turns because causes have been set in motion. Begin with the hinge. Death is process, not portal. Buddhism rarely gives us one boulder gate or a single doorman. Instead, the decisive instant is the dying mind. The quality of attention, intention, and clinging at that moment shapes the trajectory that follows. The tradition treats birth death as a continuing chain, samsara, conditioned by karma, independent origination. So, crossing is better thought of as a not dying instant in an already moving rope, rather than a one-off admission. The image to keep is the Vavakakra, the wheel of life, a cyclical diagram showing roles spun by causes and afflictions, rather than by a gatekeeper's whim. The threshold estate, mental balance, intention, and the moment of death. Practically, Buddhist teachers therefore emphasize how one dies. Calm, mindful states, and the presence of liberative insight can lead to a favorable next life, or, in the ideal of Buddhism, to the cessation of rebirth, aka nirvāṇa. Conversely, agitation, craving, and ignorance tend to condition rebirth in less favorable realms. This is why many traditions counsel meditative practice and ethical training as preparations for the death moments. The gate is a mental hinge to be trained for, not a physical doorway to be bribed or negotiated. Now, regional and doctrinal variants. Theravada, Mahayana, Tibetan Bardo, PureLands shortcuts. Different Buddhist schools frame that hinge, well, differently. Early Theravada and Abhidharma accounts emphasize instantaneous rebirth conditioned by karma. Tibetan Vajrayana elaborates an interpreted intermediate state, the bardo, with ritual manuals that aim to guide consciousness between death and the next birth. Mahayana PureLands schools, by contrast, teach devotional recitation, Amitabha's name, as a reliable way to secure rebirth in Sukhavati, the PureLands, where conditions are favorable for awakening. These are alternative practical answers to the same hinge problem. Train the mind, rely on devotional grace, or perform ritual guidance in the intermediate. Transit and Psychopomps, Rebirth, bardos, and the mind that travels. Where the Vedic and classical Hindu pictures give us our earth and then a cosmic ledger, Buddhism relocates the whole transit problem into the theater of minds. The journey between lives is less about a boat and a gatekeeper and more about which mental habit gets to do the hacking. The decisive factor is not so much where you go as how you leave. Intention, attention, and the quality of consciousness at death shape the next scene. The bardo, a theatrical intermission with Tibetan emphasis. You see, Tibetan traditions elaborate the intermediate state, the bardo, with the most explicit dramaturgy. Consciousness is said to pass through staged experiences after death that can be guided by ritual reading, notably the bardo turtle, recognition work, or the presence of a calm, trained mind. The bardo literature is both practical manual and poetic myth. Monks read, friends chant, and the next tries to turn bewilderment into recognition, so the consciousness either finds a favorable rebirth or even liberation. So, if you plan to dramatize it, the bardo turtle gives you choreography, bright light, peaceful and wrathful appearances, and a chance for a well-trained mind to get what's happening. Rebirth as mental continuity, karma, intention, and the death moments. Across schools, the core teaching is consistent. Rebirth is conditioned by karma and intention, ketana, essential to karmic results. What matters most is the pattern of volition and the mental state at the moment of dying. Serenity and insight tend to produce peaceful outcomes. Ignorance and craving, less favorable ones. Theravada and Abhidharma, commentarial lines emphasize instantaneous rebirth conditions by the immediately preceding mental flux, while practical authors urge meditative and ethical training to shape that crucial hinge. The D6 role map and what it does for you. Psychology, not moral panic. Buddhist cosmology commonly teaches 6 principal realms: gods or devas, demigods or asuras, humans, animals, hungry ghosts or preta, and hell beings, as typological descriptions of existential modes, not eternal castes. The image, Bhavakara, is diagnostic. Hungry ghosts model insatiable craving, hells dramatize overwhelming hatreds. The human realm remains prized because it offers the balanced conditions for practice. This is a functional psychological map more than a punitive register. Now, PureLands and devotional shortcuts. Some Mahayana schools, PureLands, offer a devotional alternative. Sincere recitation of Amitabha's name, the Nembutsu or Namo Amida Butsu, or aspiration for Sukhavati, aims to secure rebirth in a specially prepared Buddha fields where conditions favor awakening. It is a sociological important pathway, devotional, communal, and reassuring, that sits alongside meditative and ethical strategies rather than replacing them. So, if other traditions ask for coins, ledgers, or libations, Buddhism just asks for a well-trained attention span. Think of it as the original mindfulness policy. Keep your mind tidy, and you may skip the worst of the sequel. Court and Inhabitants, 6 realms, no throne, beings, not monarchs. Where the Vedic earth built a house for the fathers, and Hindu Puranic myths installed clerks and ledgers, Buddhism mostly refuses a single sovereign of the dead. Instead, it gives us a diagnostic cosmology, a set of conditioned places that describe modes of existence rather than eternal social ranks. The Bhavakara, the Wheel of Life, is the tiny icon for this. It shows how the 3 poisons and the plant origination spin being through the 6 realms, each realm a moral psychological province rather than a feudal court. Beginning with the 6 realms, types of suffering and opportunity. As mentioned before, the common 6-fold scheme names devas or gods, asuras, mostly jealous demigods, humans, animals, pretas or hungry ghosts, and hell beings. These are not immutable castes. They are results of conditioned action and states of mind. For example, the Preta realm models insatiable craving, the hell realms dramatize overwhelming hatred, and devas model pleasurable distraction that can blunt spiritual practice. The point is, as mentioned before, diagnostic. The map helps practitioners recognize the mental climate they occupy and why practice matters. As mentioned before as well, no permanent monarchs, beings, not verdicts. Unlike Yama's court or Chitragupta's register, Buddhism contains no single omnipotent judge, passing eternal sentences. There are beings, and in some folk cosmologies, figures like Yama appear. But the real authority is causal law. Actions condition future states. The absence of an eternal prosecutor is important. Judgment is impersonal, technical, and reversible through wise action and insight. That makes the system less courtroom drama and more moral physics. PureLands and special domains. Rescue by skillful means. Not all Buddhist myths are also diagnostic devices. Mahayana, the PureLands traditions, paint Sukhavati, Amitabha's Western paradise, as a specially prepared Buddha field where rebirth is especially propitious for attaining awakening. For many practitioners, this functions like a devotional refuge, graciously prepared environment, rather than a courtroom reward, and one that complements meditative and ethical routes to liberation. PureLands are therefore devotional answers to the same problem, the real diagnosis. Basically, if other traditions give you a judge and robes, Buddhism just gives you a mirror. Look at your habits and see which realm you're practicing for. Clean your mirror and the wheel spins less chaotically. Judgment, reward, and cultural function. Karma in practice. Nirvāṇa as escape. PureLands as refuge. The Vedic household taught that earth and right secure the fathers, and the classical Hindu cosmos turned household accounting into karmic bureaucracy. Buddhism relocates the home question. Consequences arise not from a cosmic clerk, but from causal law, and the door out of the cycle is not a pardon, but the extinction of the causes that bind one to rebirth. The moral physics here is elegant and uncompromising. Do not seek a judge who punishes or rewards. Cultivate the mind that generates fewer causal ripples. Karma as causal law, intention, consequence, and training. Buddhist doctrine treats karma as a principle of moral causation. Volitional acts, or ketana, plant seeds whose fruits ripen as future experiences and rebirths. What matters most is the quality of the mind that acts. Intention outweighs mere outward behavior. And so, ethical training or sila, meditative cultivation or samadhi, and wisdom or panya are the practical instruments by which one alters future conditioning. The teaching is technical rather than theatrical. Change the causes, change the results. Nirvāṇa, not a reward, but the unbinding. Nirvāṇa in Buddhist accounts is not a heavenly perk, but the cessation of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. The unbinding that ends samsara. It is described negatively as the unconditioned extinction of suffering, and positively as the peace and clarity that follow. Achieving nirvāṇa is therefore not going somewhere in the ordinary sense. It is the radical removal of the conditions that make a next birth possible. That ontological reorientation is what makes Buddhism distinctive among the afterlife maps we have surveyed so far. PureLands, a devotional refuge and pragmatic pedagogy. Yet, Buddhism is not only austere philosophy. Devotional communal paths do exist. They provide pragmatic support for practitioners. PureLand Buddhism offers a soteriological refuge, sincere reliance on Amitabha's woe. Recitation of his name aims to secure rebirth in Sukhavati, a Buddha field optimized for awakening. For many, the PureLands is a compassionate aid, a way to tilt the odds of rebirth in favor of practice when one's meditative capacities or conditions are limited. It functions socially as an accessible refuge and doctrinally as a complementary method to insight practice. Bardo and Ritual Guidance, the Tibetan Practical Manual. In Tibetan, Vajrayana, the intermediate state, bardo, is richly elaborated. Death becomes a series of phenomenological events that the trained or guided mind might navigate toward recognition and liberation. The bardo turtle and associated liturgies are practical manuals meant to reduce bewilderment and to point consciousness toward liberative appearances. These rites are not superstitious add-ons. They are skillful means aimed at shaping the dying mind's experience. And lastly, social function, ethics, consolation, and community practice. So, what does all this do for society? Well, Buddhism's afterlife, teaching, performance, several cultural tasks. It embeds ethical practice in a consequentialist framework. Act well to produce wholesome outcomes. It institutionalizes care for the dying and structured liturgy, monastic support, chanting, and ritual readings, and it supplies multiple accessible pathways: meditative, ethical, devotional. So communities can respond to human limitation with compassion rather than simple terror. The net result is a pragmatic soteriology. Cultivate the mind, seek wise company, and make practices available to all.